In the videos, what we're going to do is do some practice programming. Some of the stuff you'll have seen before and some of the stuff will be new to you. Whether it's new to you or whether you've seen it before really doesn't matter. If you follow along, hopefully you'll understand. One of the things that we tend to do with computers or think about with computers is games. We like to play games on computers. And a lot of the programs that are written are games based. Now, one of the things about games is that they're unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen next. They're fairly random. You're used to the term random. You know what the word random means. And in a computer, we can have random items. And that's what I'm going to show you in this particular video, is how to set up something that's random. And we will move on from a simplified version to a more complicated version a bit later on. But first of all, let's deal with random. Now, we've used a lot of Python language. You've seen while loops, for loops, if-then statements, print statements. You've seen all of that. But if we want to do something random, we can actually ask Python to do it. Python will generate random numbers. So let's take a look at a sort of abstract idea. Let's imagine that we wanted to roll a dice. So I've put this on the screen for you with dice, and as you can see, we can play lots of dice games. Maybe we've got 2 dice, or maybe we've just got a single dice. But dice have something in common. They're all numbered from 1 to 6 if we're using a cube version. But I mean, some games like maybe Dungeons and Dragons or some adventure games may have dice of different sizes and shapes with numbers on. You can see this one goes up to 20. And we'll take a look at this one as well a bit later on, which actually doesn't have sort of numbers 1 to 6, but it's got cards such as jacks, queens, kings, and so forth. And we will look at that a little bit later in our programming. But the important part for me is, how do we generate a random number between 1 and 6 and sort of treat it as a dice? And that's what we're going to look at right now. So I've got the shell going, and I'm coming to the program. The program is behind it later. I'm going to type something in the program later, but I'm going to play around with the shell first. And there is a command in Python called rand for random number and int. Now this isn't going to work. I know it's not going to work. I've got something to explain about it. Rand int, and then I say what the numbers are that I want to produce for my random number generator. Now, if I'm using a dice, as I've said, there's 6 sides, all numbered 1 to 6. So I start off by putting in 1, then a comma, and then 6. So that tells me to generate a random integer, which is a whole number, remember, between 1 and 6. But if I press enter now, it's going to give me an error. And there we go. It says randint is not defined. I'm going to explain why. This does work, but it's stored in another file, in a library file. Now, Python has thousands of libraries. In this course, we will only use one out of them all. But if you were to sort of have a job in Python a bit later on, then you'd probably use lots of different libraries. And a library is a good description of it. It's like getting a book out when you need it. And inside our book, we've got this function called randint in a particular library, and it's in a library called random. So we have to get that first. So I have to say to Python that we need to import the random library. There's lots of different libraries to do different things. As I've said, we're only interested in the random library. So if I choose import random, that's fine. Job is done. It should work, but it's not going to work at the moment. I'll explain why again. So if I retyped randint 1 to 6, I still get an error. And I get the same error. Randint is not defined. In other words, it can't find it. And the only reason this time is because I have got the library containing my random function, the generator for random numbers, but I need to specify that I want to use it on my rand int. So if I type random, that's the library, then dot for, well, inside that library there is some function called rand int, and then I put my 1 to 6 in there, that works. So I have to have the library, then I have to have the function inside the library, and then I have to say what the random numbers are that I want. So if I now press enter, it gives me the value 5. What I'm going to do is just copy and paste this for a second, because I'm going to run it a few times just to show you that it keeps generating random numbers. So 5 again, 4 this time, 2, and it shouldn't give me a random number below 1, and it shouldn't give me a random number above 6. So it's good as a representation of a dice. However, I'm getting lots of 5s, so that doesn't really encourage me that it's all that random. So if I wanted to represent a dice in my program, I would need this command here, random.randint 1 to 6. And I'm going to show you how to write that in your program. Remember here in the shell we had to use this import random. So that needs to be the very first line of my program, import random. So it's using a library of routines. And then I can specify exactly the same thing here, random.randint 1 to 6. However, I don't just want it to print out, I want to store that variable somewhere. So if I choose a variable called dice, and I set that equal to the library, then the function within the library, and then the values that I want, that works. Now, I can't see it if I save this. Let's just choose File, Save. Let's save that on my desktop and call it my dice1 and run the program. It's going to work nicely. It's not going to give me any errors, but it's not going to produce any results. So here we go. I've got no results at all. Let's just close the shell down so you don't get confused with the rest of the programs on there. Let's run this one again. And it doesn't tell me what it is. However, if I type dice here, it will tell me what the value was. And again, it's 5. So really what I would need to do is sort of print out that value. So print dice, and then when I run the program, it will find a random number between 1 and 6 and then print it out. So if I do that, run the module, and there we go, this time it's 2. And I've got to run it again to make it work. It would be nice if I didn't have to keep running the program. And also if I run it a lot of times, I will see that it only generates numbers between 1 and 6 and not below 1 or above 6. So I'm going to put this in a loop. I'm going to do it, I don't know, 30 times. So I'm going to do it for index in range 30. That means loop it 30 times. And I'm going to indent these 2 lines because they're part of the loop. Let's just close that gap up a little. And this time when I run my program, it will generate a random number between 1 and 6 for dice, and then it will print it out. So let's close the shell to get rid of that, and let's run it all again. So 30 times, there you go. It's printed out 30 if you want to count them, and you can see that we've generated all the numbers between 1 and 6. Let's just check it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we've got a computational representation of a dice. So it's fairly abstract. You should have done some work on what is abstract. But this is an abstract dice. It's computational because actually there's no dice involved at all. We're just making one up. Now, if you remember when we looked at this dice here, this one went up to 20. So I can easily change my program to produce a number between 1 and 20. So I've got that dice. So I've changed the kind of dice that I've got. So if I now run that, save it, and then we'll see that it's giving me random numbers between 1 and 20, and you might want to check them out. They're not all there, so that's a good thing for you to think of, is, well, how many times am I going to have to run this program, or how many times am I going to loop through to actually see all the different values on the dice? So that is the library random, the way we generate a random number and the numbers that we want, and the variable that we assign it to. And we only use the print dice so that we can see what's happening. If we don't use that, it does do the random number, but we haven't got a clue of it working. And this loop here just makes it run 30 times. So that's our introduction to a random number generator. Now, what I want you to think of is all the different ways that you can have a dice game. What could you do with a dice game? For example, one of the things you might want to do is add the numbers on 2 dice, or see if 2 players have, if they rolled a dice, which one would get the higher number. So we're now beginning to think of games that we can use with the dice, and I shall look at that quickly in the next video.